It's good to see you again. Today we want to look at the very first chapter of the Bible. We want to look at Genesis chapter 1. Many are familiar with the very first line in the Bible, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." And I'm impressed that right in that very first verse you have like the five fundamentals of the universe or of science. You have time, force, energy, space, and matter. The Bible and true science will always be in agreement because the Creator, God, who made the universe and the earth and everything therein, is also the author of Scripture. 2 Timothy chapter 3, 16 and 17. All Scripture is inspired of God. And so God is the creator of the universe and God is the author of Scripture. So what's found in Scripture and what we discover in the universe are going to be the same thing. We need to remember that when we're looking at anything, whether biology or physics, all that we're doing is that we're studying God's laws, the laws that the Creator made to govern this creation. Well, all we're doing is thinking God's thoughts after Him. I'm impressed with Genesis 1 because, first of all, Genesis 1 goes back to ultimate origins. It does not stop short. It simply does not go back to the beginning of life. It does not go back simply to the beginning of matter. It goes back to the actual true source and origin of everything. It goes back to God, the eternal God, without beginning or without end. That's where Genesis goes back to. And no other view of origins goes back that far and actually deals with the ultimate first cause. I'm impressed by Genesis from the standpoint of the order of Genesis, the logic behind it. It's very orderly. It makes a lot of sense. We have the creation of the universe. We have the creation of the earth. We have the separation of dry land and water. And then we begin to beautify the dry land. We begin to place trees and shrubs and grasses there in Genesis 1:11. And then we have a very orderly progression of life. We have creeping things, we have crawling creatures, we have insects, we have aquatic animals, we have land animals, and a very orderly process that works up to the pinnacle of creation, and that is man in Genesis 1 and verse 26. In Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 18, I want to take a look at that passage. Isaiah 45 and verse 18, it says, "For thus says the Lord who created the heavens, He is the God who formed the earth and made it. He established it and did not create it a waste place." God did not create the earth just some sort of lifeless orb or planet. There are many things in Genesis that we see today. That is, the biblical account of creation lines up with what we actually see in this universe, with real life, with reality, not theory. And may I suggest to you some of them. First of all, in Genesis 1:11, when it says, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees bearing fruit after their kind," we actually see that. The same thing is said of various animals that are created. That is, how they would multiply. And that is, like in verse 21, it says, "after their kind." Or verse 22, where he says, "be fruitful and multiply." We have this after their kind. Verse 24, "let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind." We see that. We see that not only with vegetation and trees, but we see that also with everything we have in the among animals. That law governs everything. That is, life comes from life. Life does not come from non-life. There's no spontaneous generation in Genesis. There's no bad science. Life does not just pop into existence. Neither does matter just pop into existence. Everything comes from God. But once life was created, the way that life will generate itself will that it will simply have a seed and it will produce itself after its kind. And in that seed will be all the genetic information for a new generation. And so corn will produce corn, and pumpkin seeds will produce pumpkins. and mice will have mice. And that's what we see. We don't see anything different from that in our world. That's reality. And so Genesis has some really excellent science in it. Of course it does. It's the Creator's account of how He made things. But things produce after their kind. We see that today. In fact, that's all we see. We do not see any exceptions to that. Things always produce after their kind. You don't go down to the store and get some seeds for carrots, and lo and behold, something else comes up. You get carrots. Let's walk a little farther here and look at something else. There's something else that I want to take a look at in Genesis that's also something that we actually see today, and that is verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our own image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Man's different. Now, we see that. That's obvious. Man is different from everything else on the planet. Not just physically, a little bit physically different. We have some similarities with the mammals as far as our bodies. But that's basically where it ends. There's something about us. There's something about us that the animals don't have. And Genesis 1:26 answers that question. There's another question that comes up, why is it okay to eat a chicken or kill a chicken, but it would be wrong to kill a man? Genesis 1:26 answers that. Why is it when you go into the grocery store, you have the poultry section, you have the beef section, you have the pork section, and whatever? Why is there no man section or human section? Genesis 1:26 answers that question. Why do we put people in prison for killing another human being, but no one goes to prison for hunting a deer? Genesis 1:26 answers that question. What makes man different is that man is created in God's image. Now, John 4:24 says that God is a spirit, and so God does not have a fleshly body like we have. So when you read Genesis 1:26, it does not mean that we physically look like God or resemble God. God is a spirit. The image that we're talking about here is that image. That is, God is an uncreated, self-existent spirit, and we are a created spirit. There's a similarity there. We have a spiritual side to us, and that Genesis 1:26 really answers a lot of questions. Why are people so incurably religious? Now, they might not all follow the same religion, but why is man so religious? I mean, 96% of the population believes in God. Where'd that come from? And where did all these religions come from? You see, man always will worship or serve something. So where did man get this incurably religious nature, this spiritual side of him? Where'd that come from? Yeah, I know it gets corrupted, and I know it's always not properly exercised, but it's still there. Where did that come from? The animals do not have it, but we have it. We definitely have it. Well, Genesis 1:26 answers that. We got it from God. Now, here's the thing to really think about, and here's the really thing to think about if you're not a Christian and you're not reading the Bible much and things like that. If you are created in God's image, that is, if you are a soul within a body, if you're a spirit within a body, all right, obviously earthly things, purely earthly, natural, physical things cannot satisfy you. So that answers a number of questions. If you're wondering why you went out and bought a car, but that did not make you completely happy. If you're wondering why you bought a house, but that did not make you completely happy. If you're wondering why you got married and you thought it was the man or woman of your dreams, but that relationship is not meeting all your needs, then Genesis 1:26 answers your question. Obviously, marriage can't meet all your needs, and a house can't meet all your needs, and a car can't meet all your needs, money can't meet all your needs, and neither can pleasure, physical pleasure, can't meet all your needs either. Why? because you're more than something physical. You are more than just a body. You have a soul, which means there's part of you that cannot be satisfied unless it's fed something spiritual, fed something biblical. Hopefully that'll be motivation. That'll be motivation. Maybe you're tired of, I get what I want, and I'm frustrated. Why is that? Why is it? What's the problem? What's the problem with me? Well, there's no problem with you. You've been just trying to feed yourself with purely physical things, when the reality is that you're more than physical. There's a spiritual side to you. There's a soul within you. It's a spirit within you that will live on. And it needs to be fed. And the reason you're not satisfied is because it's starving. You have not been feeding it. You've been trying to feed it. You've been trying to feed it with pleasure. Maybe you've been trying to feed it with sin, or drugs or alcohol, or just things. You go out and buy things, or recreation, or whatever it may be, and you're still left unsatisfied at the end of the day. Well, earthly things cannot nourish the soul. And Genesis 1:26, right there, you get the answer to that question. All right. Now, I want to look at something else here, and that is in verse 27. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And so right there, the Bible elevates the status of both men and women. They are equal spiritually before God. Now, they will have different roles, chapter 3. They will have different roles, but before God on the spiritual plane, they both have a soul, and they're equal. And they both have immense value. All right, so both men and women have a spiritual side to them, which means that it's not which means that the Bible and church and things like that are not just for women or just for men. Both genders have an equal need for God. Now, there's something else I want to take a look at. The image of God, that soul of that spirit, we see it not only in man's incurable religious nature and his spiritual needs, but we also see it in that man is different from the animals. Man thinks in a straight line. That is, man can think logically. Man can also think about the past, and man can think about the future. In fact, man can even penetrate into eternity. I can't predict the future, but I can somewhat get my head around the idea of eternity. Now, animals don't think about eternity. They're caught right now in the moment, in the now. And animals don't sit back and wonder whether they're satisfied or fulfilled or happy or not. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, I want to have you take a look at a passage. It says in verse 11, He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart. That is, God has placed in man a spirit where man can contemplate eternity, where man can think about the future, long ways in the future. And where man also thinks about things like, am I happy? Am I satisfied? Am I content? Am I fulfilled? What's my purpose here? What's the meaning of life? That's eternity in your heart. It's been placed there by God. Animals don't have that. Your cat and your dog, they're not concerned about any of that. God didn't place that there. They're just fine the way they are. They live in the here and the now and the moment. But you don't. And right there that tells you that Genesis 1:26 is true. What you see in yourself, that's actually in the passage there. Eternity has been set in my heart. I do think about life after death. I do think about whether I'm fulfilled or happy, and I do think about all those things. Also, man has an aesthetic side to him. That is what I would call that is man appreciates things that are beautiful and lovely and food that tastes good. Again, animals don't sit there and moon or ponder at the sunset and wonder how beautiful it is. They don't think about going on vacation, and they don't look at works of art, but we do. We produce them. And so that's where we got all of that. That's where you got all of that. You got all of that from your Creator. Genesis is so important, Genesis 1, because it tells you who you are. It tells you where you came from. And it tells you what will make you happy. And it tells you not to make the mistake of removing God from your life. Don't make the mistake of trying to live as if there is nothing after death, as if there is nothing after this life, that you're only going to end up frustrated and unhappy if you try to live such a life, and missing the goal and the purpose for which you were created. Anytime you take something that was created and you don't use it in a way that's according to the author or the creator, it never works as good. But when you take it and you use it according to the intended purpose, then you maximize it and you get the most out of it. If you want to get the most out of this life, then listen to the Creator, because He's the one who designed you, and He's the one who knows what will make you happy and how you will perform the best. If you tinker with that, don't be surprised if you break down, either mentally, spiritually, emotionally, or bodily, that this fantastic machine that God has given you breaks down because you have not been metaphorically changing the oil enough. All right, we'll look at something else here. I will look at Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14. There it says, God said, let there be lights in the expanse. And the word expanse means it's spreading out. The universe is an expanding out expanse and is moving away from us. It's an expanse. It's an expanding universe. That's what it is. Of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, for days, and years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and it was so. It says, God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. I want to impress upon you that Genesis frees you from superstition. The planets that God placed in the expanse are not there to rule your life. They do not determine your personality. They do not determine the future. There's nothing to fear from them. So don't have any superstition. Don't have any fears of eclipses or whatever it may be, or movements in the heaven. God clearly in Genesis tells everybody, okay, here's what they're there for. They're there to give light on the earth because the earth is the stage in the universe. All right, it's not out there. You can look through a telescope, whatever. If you like looking at the stars, that's fine, but that's not where it's at. There's not a greater show happening out there than is happening right here. This is the main show in the universe. The entire universe was created as a backdrop for what would happen on this planet, because this is where the pinnacle of creation is, man, us, who is made a little lower than the angels. That's where we are at. And this is where Jesus would come and die for our sins. This is where the whole story of redemption would be played out. This is the center stage. And so you're not, if you're thinking like, I'm not where I need to be. No, you're exactly where you need to be. Well, I'd like to be on another planet. No, there's no air there. That's bad. You need to be here. Obviously, this earth is different from everything we see around us. For millions of light years of miles of wherever we look, we are unique. Life on this planet is no accident. There are so many exacting conditions for life to even be present here that have all come together. And so this is not a fluke. This is not an accident. This has been purposed and planned. And everything out there is pointed this direction. All right. This is center stage, the earth. And the stars and the sun and the moon, they do not control your destiny. There's nothing to fear from them. Don't be upset by their movements. They are there to be used. They have practical purposes. Their purposes are for the farmer, when to plant, when to harvest. They're for the sailor, for navigation. They are very practical. They are there to help us with a calendar and the count and to tell time. They have very practical, useful purposes. There's no superstition. Don't fear them and don't worship them. Don't worship them, don't fear them, don't serve them, don't bow down to them. They are your servants. They serve you. All right, not the other way around. Don't serve them. And so that's a very helpful verse. I know a lot of people are all intent about what about life on other planets, and we get so busy about thinking about life on other planets that we forget that life has from outside this planet has spoken to us. And I'm not talking about Martians and things like that. We are so intent about finding aliens that we have missed the Creator in the process. In the book of Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, in time past, God spoke. God has spoken. The Creator has spoken to us. He has spoken to us in Scripture. He has given us a manual to tell us where we came from and how to live. He's given us a manual that tells us a glorious history of how things have transpired. He has told us how to be husbands and wives and employees and employers and a thousand different things. He has given us, Peter says, 2 Peter 1:3, all things that pertain to life and godliness. The Creator has spoken, and don't miss it. And it's so silly to be preoccupied with listening for, well, I wonder if another civilization will speak to us. The Creator has spoken to us. The Creator has spoken to us. And so thus, listen to what He has to say. All right. Now, something else, let's take a look in Genesis 1. Let's take a look at verse 28. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth, which has life, I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. Dominion. Rule over the earth and subdue it. We see that. We do not see animals ruling over us. We don't see man at the bottom rung of creation. We see man at the top. We see man exercising dominion over all life here. We see the reality of Genesis 1:28 every day. Genesis 1:28 explains, how did we acquire this dominion? It wasn't by fluke. It wasn't by an accident. We are not just some sort of evolved animal. We are the pinnacle of creation. We are men and women created in God's image, and God has given us a mandate. And the mandate is to rule this creation responsibly. That's the mandate. The mandate is to be a good steward of this planet, to use the resources. It's okay to use them to make our lives more comfortable. It's okay to improve our dwellings. It's okay to come up with medicines and things like that. It's okay to come up with new technology, but the warning is don't worship the technology. Don't put all your trust in it. Remember, it is God who has given you the ability to understand the inner workings of the universe. It is God who has given you the ability to discover His rules, His laws, the rules of physics, biology, chemistry, mathematics, other fields. That's God's subjects. God is the author of algebra. God is the author of geometry. God is the author of all those things. Those are God's rules. Those are God's laws that govern this creation. And so learn it, appreciate it, but never worship it, and never allow it to distract you from God, and never allow it to move you away from God. Remember who the source is. Remember who the Creator is. Remember what everything goes back to. Genesis 1:28. One more passage in Genesis that we see being fulfilled today. That is, we see actually lived out today. Now, let's take a look at something else in Genesis. Some people have tried to make the days of Genesis. Of course, there are 6 days of creation and 1 day of rest in Genesis. They've tried to make those days to be millions of years of time, great epochs and long periods of time, because people have felt that they've somehow needed to harmonize the book of Genesis with the theory of evolution. And the truth is, there's no way you can harmonize those 2 points of view. One of them begins with God. God creates everything out of nothing. The other is everything comes from nothing. Genesis is creation, a miracle. Yes, a miracle. Evolution is based on spontaneous generation. Everything comes from nothing. That is, matter comes from nothing, and life comes from non-life. That's spontaneous generation at least 2 times. Well, that's not scientific. All science denies that that could happen, so that would be a miracle. So you have 2 points of view that are both based on miracles. The question is, which miracle are you willing to base your eternity on? Which miracle fixed the facts? The facts of life as we see them, do they back up a theory that says everything came from nothing, that there's no design and purpose here, that life on the planet's an accident, that man's not accountable for any of his actions, that there is no right and wrong? Okay, is that our reality? And of course, no, that's not a reality at all. Or is our reality that life here has been planned, that life shows design and purpose and wisdom, that we have intricacy in what's here, that we have order in what's here, that we have a tremendous amount of design in what we see in both vegetation, cells, animals, and man, far more than we can even understand at this point in our history. That man is different from the animals, that it's wrong to kill a man, that there's a definite line of morality, that man is accountable for his actions, and we hold people accountable for their actions. We put them in jail. We execute them. But man is accountable for his actions. That we are different, that we think differently from the animals, that clearly we are in a different category than the animals. So, which is, and I think the more you think about that, you go like, well, the more I see of real life, and the science that I know is true, backs up Genesis. That's Genesis. I'm seeing Genesis every day of my life as I live. And no wonder that the psalmist says, the heavens declare the glory of God. Psalm 19 and verse 1. Every day we see the same lesson. That is, we see God's power and wisdom demonstrated in what He has been made. Okay, so the days of Genesis. May I suggest to you 3 scriptures as far as if you're wondering, are the days of Genesis real days? Well, first of all, Genesis itself would tell you that. That is, in the book of Genesis, the Bible is its best interpreter. God is not trying to trick us. God is not going to use the word day and say, oh, by the way, I meant age, or I meant millions of years of time. God is not going to do that to you. First of all, in Genesis 1:4, God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night, and there was evening and morning one day. A day is a combination of a dark period and a light period. A day is a combination of an evening and a morning. That's a day. That's simple, isn't it? God's trying to help us. God's saying, I'm not trying to trick or fool you guys. When I talk about a day, it was one day. I'm talking about a period of light and a period of darkness. I'm talking about you have an evening and you have a morning. That's what I mean by a day. Now, in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14, we also have the word day in contrast to, let them be for signs, seasons, days, years. I would say the word day in Genesis does not mean millions of years of time, because the word day in Genesis is put in contrast with a season, which is more than a day, and a year, which is 365 days. And so obviously the word day there is a smaller period of time than season or year. Now, let's look at 3 other passages. Let's look at the book of Exodus chapter 20 and in verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. The week of creation is paralleled with a real week. 6 days the Lord made everything. 7th He rested. So in Israel, they would work 6 days and rest on the Sabbath, on the seventh day. The creation week is paralleled with a real week. In fact, if you go back in the book of Genesis, you'll find that time has always been the same. Go back and look at the flood and look at the time elements that are used. You will find the second month and the 8th month, and you will find 150 days, which comes out with the 5 months, 30 days each. That is, a month has always been the same, and a day has always been the same, and a year has always been the same. And so time has always been the same throughout the Bible. Now, let's get another passage. Let's go to the book of Mark chapter 10 and take a look at what Jesus said about Genesis. In Mark 10 and in verse 6, he was asked the question, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for any cause at all? And of course the answer is no. You just can't divorce your mate for any reason. The only reason that you can divorce your mate is for the reason of sexual immorality, Matthew 19 and verse 9. The only time that you could ever divorce your mate and have the right to remarry is if they've cheated on you. And that's the only time you can do that. But it's interesting, he goes back to Genesis to answer this question. Because Genesis is a foundation chapter. Genesis takes it also back in chapter 2 to not only the founding of the universe and earth and men and women, but the marriage. Adam and Eve are married at the end of Genesis 2 because it says the man and his wife. And so if we're really going to find out the basics about marriage and the fundamentals about marriage and the length and duration of a marriage, we need to go back to Genesis 2 and find out what was laid at the foundation. And that's why Jesus does that. He says in verse 6, from the beginning of creation, we go all the way back to Genesis. And so Jesus definitely knows that there's a beginning and that there's a beginning of creation. It says, God made them male and female. Look at the text again. From the beginning. He does not say at the end of creation. He does not say millions of years from the beginning. He rather says, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Okay, so Adam and Eve are created on day 6, right? How far is day 6 from day 1? Is day 6 millions and millions of years after day 1? Not according to Jesus. If day 6 is millions and millions and millions of years from day 1, then day 6 is not even close to creation. Day 6 is at the very end of time, or near the end of time. It's not anywhere near the beginning, but Jesus placed Adam and Eve and their formation from the beginning. That's what the text says, from the beginning. So day 6 is 6 days. It's 6 days from Genesis 1:1. That's from the beginning. Now, if you're tempted to say, well, what does Jesus know about science? And what does Jesus know about creation? Well, he's the creator. Duh. I mean, he's the creator. I'm going to listen to the creator. All right? Now maybe I'm going to listen to some scientists over here. Well, I'm going to listen to the creator because I think the creator has a better insight on creation. And not only that, but on all sorts of things. In John 1:3, it says, all things came into being by him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. And it's speaking of Jesus. Jesus is the creator. And I think the creator knows what happens what happened at creation and what the time element was. Now, you were not there, and I was not there. And no one living today was there. And no theologian or philosopher or scientist living today was there. Nobody was an eyewitness of creation but Jesus. Jesus was there, and Jesus says, Genesis 1:26 and 27 is from the beginning of creation. And I'm going to believe that because Genesis does not change. The book of Genesis has been around for thousands of years, and it still reads the same way that it's always read. And it has not changed. Evolutionary theory has been changing ever since its inception. And dates have been changed. In fact, I just ran across something recently that noted that for a long time, visitors to the Grand Canyon were told that the Grand Canyon was about 6 or 7 million years old. Well, now they're saying that it's 17 million years old. Well, now that's a big mistake. That's an 11 million year gap. Now, if we could make it 11 million years older, then can't we make it younger? I mean, obviously, the very fact that they were off by 11 million years tells you that the 6 or 7 million year date was not proven, and it was not written in stone, and it's variable. And if you can be off by 11 million years, my perspective is, well, if you got that off by 11 million years, why don't you come back to me when you really know what it is? Because I think if you're off by 11 million years, you're not even close. You're not even close. I think you still need to work on your estimates. Genesis, though, in contrast, still reads the same way it's always read. And so I'm not going to hang my hat on a theory that still is changing to this day and is in constant flux, and where dates are continually being adjusted dramatically, not just a little bit, but where dates are being multiplied or halved or whatever, but where we have dramatic changes in so-called dates of the universe or the earth or things like that. So I won't hang my hat on that. I'm going to trust that the Creator knows how old the earth is and what really happened. Let me give you one more passage. In the book of Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, Paul, in speaking of man and man's accountability, says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made." Well, the thought there is that if God's invisible attributes have been clearly seen since the creation, then someone's been there to see them. That verse doesn't make any sense if we have the beginning, okay, and we have millions of years or billions of years, and then man shows up. Well, if man shows up billions of years after Genesis 1:1, then man is not at the beginning. Man's not even close to the beginning. Man's at the tail end. But Romans 1:20 says that God's invisible attributes have been clearly seen from the beginning of creation, which means that someone has been there to see them, and someone has been there to understand them, and the someone is man. Man's been there. In fact, the next verse would tell you that, or the end of verse 20 would tell you that, so that they are without excuse. So they is mankind. If it's Adam's was without excuse, and Noah would have been without excuse, and Abraham and Seth and Enoch and everybody else in there, you can easily tell there's a God from just looking at what has been made, which means that I'm without excuse and you're without excuse also if we don't serve Him. Now I know a number of people are not going to believe Genesis, because Genesis brings in God, and you bring in God, you got right and wrong, you got heaven and hell, and that means you're accountable. And so we're going to opt for evolution or something like that, and that means that I'm not accountable. Okay. If you're going to do that, you need to understand this. If you opt for a theory that basically concludes that you're not accountable to God, then neither is anybody else. So if you can do whatever you want to do, that means everybody else can do what they want to do. All right? You understand that? If you're not going to be accountable to God, then you got to give everyone else the same freedom not to be accountable to God, which means if they steal something from you, you can't gripe. If they rape someone you know, you can't complain, and you better not put them in jail. You're not accountable, they're not accountable. Don't be complaining if they don't repair their fence. Don't be complaining if they're blaring loud music at night, or if they got some dog that's barking in the backyard and you can't sleep. Don't you be complaining about that, okay? No accountability means no accountability for everyone. If you don't want to serve God, then you have no right to complain when other people infringe upon your rights, all right? If you are not created in God's image, then you have no rights. You have zero rights because you have no value. You're just an evolved animal. You're just a product of chance. And when you die, they'll just throw you in the ground and that's the end of you. Do you understand that? So don't opt for that theory unless you're willing to live up to it. If you've been going through your life, you're saying, no, God, I don't want to believe in that. I want to do what I want to do, but you've been complaining about everybody else, you're a hypocrite. If you're not going to serve God, then you have no right to ever complain about anything else or anything anybody does. If you do, you're a hypocrite. So, you know what I decided to do? I don't want to be a hypocrite. I decided that I am accountable to God, and so is everybody else. And that means I'm going to live the Christian life, and I'm going to encourage everybody else to do so. And that's why we have this class. If you have any questions, feel free to call me on the phone and bend my ear. 503-644-9017. Check us on the web, www.beavertonchurchofchrist.net. On the website, there's an email link there. Feel free to send me an email, but please, please, only send me an email if you want me to respond back. If you're just going to send me an email and gripe and not want a response, that's a cheap shot. Be a man. Be a man about it. If you're going to send me an email, then certainly I have the right to respond back. So only email me if you really want to have a discussion. We'll catch you later. Thanks.